So I think to start with, what I saw that HansaWorld was used by over 500,000 users across multiple geographies and in many different languages. So just a quick snapshot on what is your current user base in Spread?
Sure. So we have two product lines. We have a small end product line that's the core product being standard accounts, which is a small end accounting package product. And then we have multiple small end specialized vertical packages. So we have, as an example, a product called Standard POS for small end retail shops. So rather than the large supermarkets, if you're a small maybe convenience store in a corner or something like that, that you don't need maybe the same kind of processing power, it would be a good fit in that kind of environment. Similarly, we have a small end option for the hospitality sector. So for both the hospitality for B&Bs and guest houses, and then hospitality when it comes to restaurants. So if you're not exactly a restaurant, but perhaps you own a smaller takeaway, then we have two products, one called Standard Hotels, which is for the B&Bs and guest houses, and then Standard Eats, which is for the takeaways. Then we have our larger end product line, Standard ERP, which is distributed via our partners and our distributors worldwide. So the combination of the 550 entails the people who have downloaded, the various companies that have downloaded our software for the small end products as well, since they're an automatic install. So there's no consulting or implementation that goes in with that product. It's an automatic download product. There can be obviously customizations afterwards if people want additional functionality and training and so on, but we see it as being a almost plug and play type situation. So people are up to date straight away.
So you also have a CRM product, if I'm not wrong. Is that correct?
That's right. So we have a standalone CRM offering. So unlike many ERP providers, we offer a CRM vertical as well. We find it's a big benefit because, obviously people are looking at the quantifiable information when it comes to an ERP, looking at the numbers and the kind of insight that you can get from that area, but being able to combine that with the qualitative information that you get from a fully functioning CRM, becomes quite an added benefit. So having the two, we have numerous reports internally that are, part of the key product. So it comes as standard with our standard ERP offering. And as an example, one of the most common and say powerful reports that we would use is the customer status report. So on that report, you can pull up information about your contact, be that a supplier or a customer, but it pulls up information on, for instance, the quantifiable stuff, like what is the last invoice that you've invoiced them for? Is that an open invoice? When did they last pay you? Maybe what are the discount terms and payment terms that you have discussed with them? And then on top of that, then as well, you get a lot of the CRM type information. So information regarding, what is the actual name of the point of contact that you're likely to be discussing this with? When were they last engaging, or when did they maybe call a support line looking for assistance and so on? So you get a full, 360 overview of the interactions with your customers and points of contact.
So CRM space is quite an interesting space. You will find that there are two ends of the spectrum. Some customers who are really keen to make sure they have all the up-to-date data, they make most of all the different stages of leads, conversion and everything. And then there are people who are still at the other end of the spectrum, trying to perhaps move from spreadsheets into something more organized and trying to learn how to make best use of it. So from what you have seen, what do you see as the key sort of current trends or usage sort of trends in the CRM space, and what is the key value proposition which Hansa brings to the sort of user base, which allows users to perhaps go with you as opposed to something like a Salesforce?
Well, I mean, to start, I suppose, with the last question, the second being, I suppose, why, and really what I'm saying is the out of the box. So the functionality that's provided out of the box, not that long, implementations that you have with many other CRM systems. Admittedly, we are not, we'll say, offering a big, powerful CRM system. What we're offering is probably like a mid-tier level CRM. So for those that want a heavier hitting CRM functionality, that's not likely a good fit for us. We're offering, I suppose, from what the example you've given us, those people that want that intro into the CRM functionality and see the benefits that come with getting that insight into the cooperations they've had with their points of contact. Particularly now, I feel, it's GDPR, obviously, within the European context has been meaning that a lot of people are very much looking at their interactions with their point of contacts and how they're maintaining and using that personal data has become a big question mark at the moment. While GDPR is relevant within the European context, there is already a number of other relevant laws in other countries. For instance, Canada has very similar laws for quite a while. So a lot of people are looking at that, and once they've started reviewing it and seeing the kind of waste, I suppose, they have of the contacts that are there, it's raising a lot more questions recently. So when it comes to functionality requirements, I suppose, if you want to move away from the basic spreadsheets, I suppose that the key thing I would say is to have something that would be able to offer you that insight, to very quickly being able to maintain information about interactions you've had with the customers, because more and more, and we're seeing it ourselves within ERP systems, quite a lot of companies tend to offer some of the same functionality, at a very base level. There are those, ourselves included, I hope, that are offering that bit more. But at that base level, it is a case that it is becoming more and more about the customer service interaction. And really, if you want to give good customer service, you need to be able to maintain records about how you are interacting with the customers.
Yeah, so that's a very important angle. Often CRM can be looked at as a tool which a company uses to perhaps maximize its revenue or, for internal benefits. But I think you come from a completely different angle, or a very important angle, where the customers can also benefit from it. So just going into a little bit more detail as to when it comes to customer service, having the up-to-date status of a customer or understanding the customer requirements a bit more, how do you think it benefits the customer? From your experience, of course, with the markets you serve.
Well, we've all, I think, been at some point or another on those customer support lines of where you get passed from one person to another and you feel like you have to restart the story back at the very beginning. So avoiding that frustration alone means you're starting off the point of engagement at a much better place. You already, the person feels like they understand you a lot better, they know where you're coming from, they have that history. And that's a very important point for building up even a base level of trust for that ongoing interaction. So
absolutely. Yes, there is nothing more frustrating from having to explain the same problem to multiple different people, and you almost feel like you don't want to repeat everything again, and you just feel. So that makes perfect sense. I read a blog post from you, I think, on IBM blogs, which talked about cognitive. Is that kind of in the customer service space? Are you doing something around AI, use of AI or bots or something in that space?
We certainly are. So this year we're at the pilot customer stage. So we have for a while now been closely cooperating and in partnership with IBM on a number of different accounts. So one of them is interacting with IBM for their use of the Watson product. So Watson being their AI intelligence element. And what we've created essentially is a talk bot that is out of the box. So by that, I mean that there's a number of other providers out there, particularly within the ERP element, that are talking about, the opportunities that are available when it comes to bots. But for many, it's just out of, because from a implementation and a project perspective, it's just too timely and too costly. So what we've done is we've integrated the AI and basically allowed it to interact with the various registers that are common within an ERP functionality. So it can, replace many of the more menial and kind of administrative tasks, allowing to, those people time to be freed up maybe to engage in other more profitable and maybe more difficult tasks to deal with. So what we're seeing it really as being a useful insight for is potentially support lines, administrative lines, where people are calling up looking for information on their perhaps their accounts, sending copies of invoices, backup statements, that kind of thing. But also on top of that, then moving in the direction of stock, where is my good that I put the order through for, and so on, and being able to allow people to have that kind of automation out of the box is the core that we're looking for.
So will you at some point also look into things like speech recognition when it comes to interacting with your bots? Have you looked into that space? Because I think some elements of Watson also supports that sort of functionality. So is that something on the cards?
It is. At the moment, the offering that we have with IBM is going to be largely in the English language for rollout. Now, the reason being is that there's a number of Watson functionalities that we're utilizing in order to produce this chatbot. So there's a voice to text, text to voice, and there's phone assist that goes with our interaction with our own business communicator for the actual creation of a telephone option, and so on. So all of that means that there's multiple functionalities and product offerings from the IBM side that are being engaged, and not all of those are available in multi-languages. So that overlap. So we need to wait for that. But I'm understanding that IBM are working hard on it.
Yeah, I guess it will have to be more of a partnership approach. When Watson is ready for that, you can do more around that space. So just to finish off on the CRM side of things, so from your experience, the customers who adopt CRM and customers who are at the end where they are sort of introducing themselves to the CRM, what would be your key message as to why should they do it?
I suppose that, as I said, the benefit that you get really from distinguishing yourself from a customer service element, and once you do build up that trust, even for customer support engagement, even building up that trust from a key account management and ongoing sales, I think is very important. So we're seeing a lot more people, engaging very well when it comes to internal sales or key account sales after CRM adoption.
Okay, perfect. So staying with the same sort of size of the customers, when we're talking about small outfits or very small businesses, you also mentioned your accounting product, which was almost plug and play and people can just download it. So a similar sort of question for businesses who are probably running on notebooks or spreadsheets, and if they move to what you are offering, which is probably a lightweight accounting system, what sort of benefits are you seeing those businesses drawing out of your solution?
Time saving, and anyone when it comes to obviously as well as intentioned as we all might be when it comes to dealing with stuff and logging it on pen and paper or on a spreadsheet, that is not going to have the same accuracy levels as you will get out of an automatic system where you have sub-ledger integration, where, for instance, you issue your invoice and it automatically books the fact that that debtor owes you money. It automatically logs the fact that there's a sale on your P&L. So time saving, without a doubt. But on top of that, I mean, any business needs to be on top of what it is owed at a very basic level, and what funds are coming in, and making sure the bottom line has to be positive in order for us all to stay in business end of the day. So having that comfort of being able from a quick and easy click of a button to get that kind of insight into your business, I think is important, and not double guessing, rerunning numbers again and again yourself, having that assurance you enter once and all that back, and it's a sense of propriety over your business.
Exactly. So I think to some extent, if the cash flow is really good, it is possible. One of the things which I believe also is important, that when you have a lot of cash flow going in small businesses, sometimes it is difficult to understand the profitability or even the sustainability of till such time you have sat down towards the end of the year and done the totals, and then you realize, hang on, I didn't know. in terms of the main users of that solution geographically, where do you see the spread? Is it more used in Europe and US, or is it across the world everywhere? I mean, how does that spread work?
It is very globally spread. Now we are seeing larger fluctuations in general for us. So at the moment, our downloads are varying between 5,000, 7,000 per month. So it's a substantial amount of people that are interested. Now we are available on the iTunes stores, the Mac App stores, Google Play. We're available on our own website, so standardaccounts.com as well. So those downloads are across all of those areas. But where we're seeing actually the largest interest is coming from China. So China tends to be our number one. I mean, given population size alone, that's obviously maybe a given. But I think having a Mac offering in particular, that is able to download and run has been very important for that market. It's an unusual benefit that people are seeing. And one of the big things as well, as I mentioned, I mentioned the various locations that were available to download. Traditionally, people see that downloads from those areas are for, smaller end apps. So something that maybe can only produce an invoice or can only do one functionality, because many of the IT systems that are out there that are claiming to be mobile friendly and having mobile options, in fact, are only offering limited functionality on mobile devices. So they're picking and choosing the functions that they feel might be relevant to run, while our system has been architecturally developed to be so light that the full client, so the full accounts package or the full even ERP, can run off a mobile client.
Oh, that's very interesting. So sometimes what we find is that technology businesses in particular, including the likes of Twitter and Google, when they go into the China market, they have to do certain things differently, whether it is caching on China servers or making sure the infrastructure within China works okay. So what has your experience been in that space?
Well, the fact that we are not doing hosting, so we're offering an on-premise only option, so the person can download for onto their own client only. That region has been important. We do have already a hosting partner should people want to move to that option within China. But once you move into a higher level ERP, there is a lot of red tape, shall we say, when it comes to getting security clearance within the Chinese market. That can be quite painstaking for companies that are traditionally from both the US or Europe.
Yeah, exactly the same thing we are finding in other sort of sectors as well. So when it comes to geographies, I think we've touched base on geography a little bit. What about industries? So we talked about the hotel industry, and you said you have a solution for hotel industry. Is that solution primarily around financing and accounting, or does it also go into CRM style space, as in keeping record of the customer database and understanding, who is coming from where and all that?
Yeah, well, it does both. Which is actually quite unusual at the hospitality end sector. So what you tend to have is some form of front of house option in order to deal with the guest management, placing reservations, maybe dealing with reminders to your guests about what kind of maybe wake up phone calls they want, or what kind of preferences they have with regards to reservation bookings, maybe in the restaurant and so on. But we offer both. So we offer both the front end and back end. And again, an integration on that. So, merging again the two, where you have maybe more qualitative information being stored again with the finance side. So both being integrated tends to be quite unusual. But I think more and more people are seeing the benefits of that integration rather than having to maintain multiple versions of various software and having to deal with the maintenance of the integration.
So when it comes to integration, is it fair to say that the customers who are using your product will find it easier to integrate with solutions like bookings.com or Trivago or people like that, who would be looking at exchanging data and availability in a certain sort of a real-time fashion, or at least in a structured fashion, which would be very difficult for small hotels who are sort of not using a software for that reason?
Sure. Well, we have done a number of integrations directly with some of those booking sites, but on top of that as well, one of our partners, SiteMinder, who is a booking channel management system. We also partner with them, and essentially what they do is that they deal with the multiple booking sites. So you have mentioned already, the booking.com, maybe hotels.com, and so on. So if you are a hotel, it's likely that you're operating and trying to advertise yourself on not just one booking site, but likely multiple, and being able to maintain those verticals to make sure there isn't overbookings, and making sure that you're pricing your rooms at the correct point dependent on demand that is filtering through is quite important. So essentially what the SiteMinder does is it takes the information from the various booking channels and then implements it directly into your system. So if you get booked out for your one room that's last available on booking.com, automatically hotels.com will notify that they are that you're fully booked as well.
Okay.
So we work, apologies. So we work with both those booking channels. However, what I meant, I suppose, by the integration is the stuff that is offered directly by ourselves. Now, we don't offer, these booking sites directly as an integration, as do, neither do any of the other ERPs. What I meant, I suppose, is the fact that both the front end and back end being integrated is quite unusual. While, for instance, you have people, that offer front end integrations, and then, their back end might be something completely different. So on top of having to maintain things like the booking channel integrations, they're on top of that having to maintain even a very basic level of making sure that the system, that books a reservation actually results in an invoice and income.
Okay, yeah, makes perfect sense. Now moving to the sort of big solution, ERP. What's the best way to start understanding your solution? Should we look at what it does for manufacturing big businesses, or should we look at what are the top sort of benefits you're seeing people are taking and where the trend is going? I'll leave it up to you to start, because it's quite a big area, so I don't want to constrain it by my questions. So let's talk about your ERP solution.
Well, the ERP solution, I suppose, again, that what we're finding is that the architecture and the actual core design from our side is really our key benefit. So the lightness of the software that I've mentioned, I think before, is one of the big things, because that means that many areas where, internet speeds and so on, when people are looking to move to the cloud is an issue, it's not necessarily an issue for us. So, the big heavy systems of old, or even current, sadly, as well, that aren't able to operate at decent speed levels for users to be able to engage properly with their system. That isn't an issue that we have. So that's quite an important thing for an ERP system, I think, as well. The other thing, I suppose, for our ERP system, when we're looking at, is the multi-verticals. So again, offering something out of the box is quite an important function. So there's multi-verticals that we operate across when it comes to manufacturing, retail, hospitality, as we mentioned, for both restaurants and for hotel or resort. We're offering professional services with job costing, stock management, or warehouse management, and so on. So being able, again, to operate all these things out of the box offering is quite important. And it's not just important for the maintaining of speed and the maintaining of efficiency, but also from an implementation perspective, and the same workflows and the same user experience is maintained for us across all of our countries and all of our verticals. So from a customer engagement and learning perspective, you understand the workflow of where to go. Okay, this is in a register, so your register maintaining your point of contacts, or your list of invoices if you're relating to your sales invoices, or sales order with sales order, and settings and reports. It's a very easy system to operate under. And for those people, particularly where it's more common now operating in multi-regions, having to retrain people in multi-languages where it's a completely different workflow and a completely different system feel is very frustrating, and can and has always resulted in very complicated, with long-drawn implementations. So this is why you're seeing in many implementations, dragging out for long periods of time, because let's say the consultant has mastered the situation in one region, they move to another, and it's a completely different setup again. So the ease of implementation is a big thing for us.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. When it comes to the ERP space, I think it's probably fair to say that when it comes to larger systems, ERP has been around for a while now, and it has evolved over a period of time. So do you have any examples where whether you or your customers are pushing the boundaries, so to speak, on in that space. Because we talk a lot about AI and chatbots and customer facing things and all those things. The back end bit sometimes does not get the limelight, if you like. So here's the opportunity to perhaps pick one or two examples where we can say, look, this is where innovation is there, or we're pushing boundaries.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, and perhaps it's my background as an accountant myself, but at a very base level, you know, an ERP system largely provides you with workflow process management, obviously, but at an accounts level, for management of those processes, those have been hugely automated across multi-industries now. And the fact that it's been automated to such a level means one of two things of changes that are, you know, down the pipeline, or many already in process. One is that across the ERP, I would say, industry, there's going to be a large review of how pricing structure works. Traditionally, pricing has been very much dependent on user engagement. So basically, the more users you have, the more expensive your bottom line becomes overall. So that's basically the, you know, a 10 user system is going to cost a lot less than a 100 user system.
Yeah.
Because of the fact of the automation of workflows, that needs to be reviewed considerably, because what would have cost, you know, only 10 people to do work, you know, before, now can perhaps be done by one person because of the amount of automation that has been done. So I think that's going to be the next big, we'll say, change that is coming within the ERP industry, and looking at how customers feel, you know, what is a fair method for valuation? Is it going to be based on a percentage of turnover? Is it going to be based on maybe a level of automation, you know, for functionalities or functions that have been engaged? So maybe something along the lines of transaction-based accounting systems, you know, where it would count the number of transactions processed. So there's a lot of questions that are out there on how that's going to evolve further. But the second area, I think, with the automation coming in means that there will be a lot more regulatory requirement when it comes to ERP systems. So many countries already are, you know, providing these ERP listings of what are and aren't approved softwares. The reason being is that from an accountant perspective, or an auditor perspective, you're very limited in your ability to be able to analyze books further, because so much has been, you know, automatically done. And unless you know how all the back-end processes are working, it's quite difficult to audit that. So what a lot of countries are doing is that they're providing a review, a much more thorough review of the accounting package and how all those processes work, and assuming that they're working in a way they feel to be reasonable and you know, tax efficient, it means that you then get onto this approved listing of accounting software. And by being on this approved listing, then you can continue to operate. So I think those are two big changes that are coming, that both the ERP industry is going to see and the end customer is going to be seeing as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very important point. We saw that change almost even in providers like Oracle on core technology, is even databases. They were looking at providing licenses based on the CPU types, or you know, different ways of pricing the solution, because the value customers are drawing from the solution is changing, especially when automation comes into picture. So when we talk about ERP, we do talk about, compared to doing manual accounting, ERP is automating things. Or in the past, we used to use the term computerized sort of processing. But in the modern ERP systems, what are the top automation use cases? I mean, if you were to pick an example of automation from anything which sort of comes into mind, what is the most effective automation which is allowing customers to benefit from, either in reducing the costs or increasing efficiencies, or perhaps even doing something which was not possible without the automation?
Again, I suppose I'm back to the kind of core accounting functionalities if we're looking at it from accounting and ERP functionality package perspective. So certainly along those areas, things like automatic bank bookings, automatic calculations, and submissions when it comes to tax reporting as well has been a huge cost saving and time saving for companies. And again, back, you know, to the accuracy levels as well that are, you know, more evident when it comes to the computer automatically doing it than someone, you know, out manually filling in these things. On top of that, I suppose, down the line, if we're looking at, efficiencies, I would say AI, I suppose, is the big question mark. And what we're seeing, and I think is going to be an important trend in this coming year, is, people vying for the definition of what is AI. And there needs to be very much a distinction between what is automated reporting and
Yeah.
the application of intelligence on top of that reporting. Is the system actually adding something extra than the ability for just a voice recognition of a report? And what we're seeing along many ERP providers is that they're very much pushing people, going, we have the AI offering because it's very much a buzzword of the moment, and it not necessarily applying any different benefit than you're already getting from a report. And that is quite different. So, when I referred, for instance, to our talk about many people are already maybe au fait with the long lines again of queues you have maybe on support type centers of these larger institutions like banks or tax authorities that have maybe engaged some form of robot interaction when you're on maybe a telephony system. So you call up their support lines, but there has to be a big distinction between a, do you want this, this, and this, where they're limiting and it's closed questioning, versus an open conversation similar to you and I are having now, and the ability for the bot to be able to understand what it is the person wants. It creates a much more different dynamic and a much broader option for the bot to continue to learn and grow to create a broader customer experience.
Yeah, I completely agree. So when we talk about AI and cognitive, predictive analysis also sometimes comes into discussions. Do you see any potential of predictive helping out with the ERP space? For example, if you are in manufacturing, can you predict something which allows you to do better inventory control, for example, any of that sort of nature?
Most definitely. And actually inventory is a very good example, particularly if you look at it from the procurement side. So being able to look at market trends, and depending on how broad a scope you want to give the AI option to look at, but even if it was a case of looking at particular suppliers perhaps, and looking at what are the best times in order to buy in particular items, maybe looking at more stagnant items that are sitting in stock, and looking to make recommendations perhaps to the salespeople at that point, going, perhaps we need to look at some discounts that's not in line with the, it's about to go out of date perhaps, or perhaps the pricing isn't quite correct based on current trends within the market. All of that is, hugely important, both from a sales perspective and procurement perspective. And I think there can be a lot of analytics applied in order to give much better suggestions.
So is it possible to put some sort of quantification on what percentage benefits people can see in inventory management or procurement in using AI in their ERP solutions? Is there any statistics available?
Currently, I'm not aware of any statistics myself. It is down the line actually for us as well, moving in that AI direction. But again, our goal, I suppose, is to move in that direction, to be able to provide it to customers again out of the box. So I'm sure it's a case, many of them are already claiming to do it, but there's a difference between being able to claim to do it and you're able to do it today versus being able to do it, 2 years down the road, where you've spent substantially on it.
Yeah, completely agree. So now moving more to sort of a little bit lighter side of the chat. As the operations manager for such a large solution, what keeps you awake?
The constant phone calls and messages when you're working with a worldwide organization. So be that some suppliers or people in China that want some attention, maybe very early morning my time, or my nighttime dealing with our CEO Carl Bolin, who's based in New Zealand. It's a round the clock job. But I think it's the same with any business really. It's a case of making sure you have the correct prioritization and key focus. And I think for ERP more than any company, where we're selling, I suppose, businesses the idea that and vision that they need to have that focus and feel going forward. We ourselves are just as conscious of it. So once you have the key strategies, importance in mind, it's easy to have a bit more focus.
Yeah, completely agree. And yes, these days follow the sun support. The 24/7 piece is becoming increasingly the norm for global companies, and people who have teams or customers across the different time zones are somehow having to find a way of staying awake all the time.
I wouldn't recommend the staying awake all the time, but yeah, I think it's just a balancing act, really. Yeah.
Yes. So, the last question from your experience so far, any sort of funny incidents or anecdotes you can share, which I know the enterprise technology space is kind of very boring in a sense. We talk about technologies, cloud, this network, and often you won't find IT professionals sort of cracking a joke unless they are in a pub somewhere. So I don't know if you have any stories without giving names, of course, if you don't want to, which you can share, which you thought would be like really funny.
Sure. Well, I suppose it's always about, when you're providing a product, about meeting customer expectation. And again, moving towards this area of, automation, I do recall one consultant, and we've moved away ourselves from giving direct consulting and implementation. We're providing through a partner network. But this consultant was engaging with a customer, and he was explaining how easy it was and how quick and available some information is. So, something like 3 clicks and you get this information, which is quite impressive when you compare it to having to open up a one. And we were showing this as being a big benefit, and the guy was just looking, going, well, why can't we have it in one? And
so I think we probably covered a fair amount of ground, and I'm sure there will be enough. And we talked about quite a lot of different things, geographies, breadth, and everything. Is there anything else you want to say before we conclude this session?
There was one other thing actually that popped into my mind while we were mid-frozen, and that was about for the automation. So I think, a lot of emphasis has been put on recently as well about being able to gain information. You mentioned the manufacturing environment from IoT solutions. And, while I think that's important is in being able to, for instance, from a machine perspective, be able to get information if you have multiple machines of at what point perhaps they need maintenance, at what point maybe do you need to replace certain parts, and you automatically maybe get a purchase order or some warning coming up and generated within your ERP system that goes to the relevant person. I think that's a big benefit. But I would say I think that the IoT trend has, outside of perhaps a few areas, been maybe overemphasized, than it is. I think it is just another expansion on automation that has perhaps maybe already been there for some time.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that as well as understand that. So I think that's a very, very good point. So I think thank you very much for your time. It has been really insightful and pleasure talking to you. And have a good day.
You too.